Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Today's webinar is on the confessions of a former Residence Council assistant. Now, just before we begin, I wanted to let everyone know that today's session is going to be recorded for educational purposes, and that we have muted all lines this afternoon to minimize the background noise and distractions. And lastly, I wanted to let you know that we will hold all questions to the end, at which point you'll be able to unmute your lines or send in any questions that you may have through the chat box, which will be located at the bottom of your toolbar. And so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to OARC's own Melissa McBee.
Hi everyone, can you hear me all right? Good afternoon everyone, and thank you Josie Lee for the introduction. I am so pleased to be speaking with you today and to really be honing in on the role of the Residence Council Assistant or Staff Assistant, which isn't really something we've done in the past. I joined OARC back in April of this year, so I'm still truthfully a bit of a newbie, but my experiences working hands-on with resident councils over the last decade has really helped me jump right into my current role as education and home support facilitator. I am extremely passionate about helping others, sharing information, and storytelling. And I'm hopeful that through some of the sharing today, I can touch on some of the areas that you are currently working through so that you feel validated and supported in new ways. So just a little information about me. I completed a master's degree in health and aging at McMaster, and before becoming a manager in long-term care, I worked as a recreation assistant in various long-term care settings, both in the province of Ontario and out in British Columbia. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to work closely with 3 very different resident councils. My role and responsibilities as staff assistant were always evolving, and I continue to witness this today with other assistants, that we are always in a state of learning and growing. So during our time together today, I will focus on 3 main objectives that I hope to achieve: to normalize and talk about some of the perceived challenges experienced by the resident council assistants, to direct you to some of OARC's tools to set you up for success, and I will suggest some strategies and small changes that may enhance the resident council meetings at your homes. Now, before we jump into the meat of today's webinar, I was hoping to gauge how everyone is feeling about the role of the resident council assistant. For those of you who are working in this capacity, I ask you to anonymously complete the poll that should be popping up on your screens momentarily. See, I see Josie Lee has opened the poll. So my question to you is, as resident council assistant, how would you describe your feelings towards the role? Are you feeling supported? Do you feel like you're just getting by? Or are you feeling relatively unsupported at this time? Give everyone a few more seconds there to fill that out. That's great. I'm actually pretty thrilled to see that 61% of you are feeling supported. Now, I know there is 33% who feel they're just getting by and 6% who are feeling unsupported. So I do hope that today's presentation, we might see some changes in those numbers as we wrap up the presentation. I'll touch it on that area again, just in terms of everyone's comfort level and level of support. So jumping ahead, I think it's important that we first acknowledge our new reality in long-term care. The residents moving into long-term care are changing. They are living with increasingly complex care needs and living with cognitive changes. And this means that resident councils are operating in a very different environment than, say, even 5 or 10 years ago. And therefore, the resident mix that comprises a home's resident council and may attend the meetings is also very different now. As a result, I would argue that there is more perceived pressure on behalf of resident leaders, resident council assistants, and administrators to ensure that the success and the resilience of the council within the home. To start off our discussions today, I wanted to share some feedback that we've received from staff assistants supporting resident councils. Some of the comments included statements like the following: there are no appropriate residents moving in to be part of the council anymore. No one wants to attend the meetings. I do everything for the council. We once heard someone say, I am the council. People only attend the meetings to complain. No one has the attention span to sit through a 1-hour meeting anymore. I feel that it is all on my shoulders. Or I have no time to do it. Now, before we jump into the next slide, I have another quick poll to present to the group. I'd like to ask you how you or the current person acting as the assistant to council became the residence council assistant in the first place. Was it something built into your job description, something you inherited as part of your role or responsibilities? Or was it decided upon through discussions with the resident council and the home's administrator? I can tell very quickly that most of you have inherited the role as part of your job description, and the numbers are still going up, about 68% of you. So now, according to the legislation around residence councils, there is some direction in there about how someone becomes the assistant to the residence council. Firstly, the resident council assistant is appointed by the home. And this should be through a negotiated process between the residence council and the administrator. The staff assistant must be acceptable to the resident council's leadership team. And I would say it's important to note that not everyone has the right personality, the right skills, or the time necessary to work collaboratively with the residence council. And this may change in your homes over time or with turnover. We all know that resident council is much more than a monthly meeting. There are agendas to create, meetings to advertise, minutes to capture, action items to follow up on, fundraisers to support, banking to be done, and much, much more. So a lot of work goes on behind the scenes and between meetings. In the absence of a trusting and supportive relationship between the residents and their assistant and with the administrator, it is very likely that there will be challenges when creating and sustaining an effective residence council in any home. So it is important to nurture these relationships and focus on maintaining good communication between these 3 key pillars of residence council. Despite the common concerns and challenges we identified earlier, I want to stress that it is a true privilege to work directly with residents in the capacity of residence council assistant. Many team members, including managers, do not always get the chance to take off their leadership hats and work alongside residents as partners in such meaningful ways. As the assistant, you are simultaneously a confidant, you are a spokesperson, and an advocate. You are afforded the chance to build strong, trusting relationships with residents outside of your day-to-day role and responsibilities. And when I look back at my own experiences, my participation with residence councils allowed me to get to know residents on a deeper level. And we'll get into why this is so important a bit later. I think it's very easy to forget your why we do things, especially when we start to feel like it's another task on our ever-growing to-do list. And while this might not change for you, and I certainly don't claim to have all the answers for you here today, I hope that the resident council assistants on the line feel validated in their experiences, but that they also come away with a sense of hope and even some renewed enthusiasm that you can bring back to your respective councils. For residents, administrators, and other people taking part on the webinar today, I hope that perhaps you will see the resident council assistant in a new light, with new appreciation for the unique situations that they face, the meaningful work that they do, and come away with some new ideas on how you can support them in their role. So I wanted to share a few important reminders and points of clarification from the legislation to get us started. Firstly, the resident council assistant is not part of the residence council. Instead, the assistant is in a unique position because they are serving as the link between council operations and the long-term care home. When acting as the assistant to the residence council, the staff assistant is not acting as a representative of the licensee or the home. Resident council assistant takes instructions from the residence council, and they must work hard to ensure confidentiality so that the residents can share openly and honestly in meetings, and ultimately the residents determine what information should be captured in their meeting minutes, for example. Some of the duties assigned to the council assistant may include the following: advertising meetings or council-sponsored events. They may be assisting with agenda preparation with the home's leadership team, the resident council leadership team. They might be helping to organize a meeting space for the meetings to take place. They assist with portering and assisting residents to and from meetings. They may be co-facilitating discussion at meetings and running the meetings as well. They are actively recording, typing, and distributing approved meeting minutes. The assistants are always collaborating with the administrator and department heads to generate written action plans and follow up for the council when concerns or ideas are brought forward. And they also assist with banking and elections. And that's not an exhaustive list. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes. So the duties of a resident council assistant may vary or change over time depending on the nature of support requested by the council. They may even change from meeting to meeting. So that's important to keep in mind as well. Now, reflecting back on some of my own experiences, and I've got some dramatic selfies there on the slides for you to have a giggle at, I can assure you that I can empathize wholeheartedly with many of the challenges and the frustrations identified by other people working in this capacity right now. I experienced many barriers to running what I felt were productive resident council meetings. There was declining meeting attendance and a decreasing number of resident leaders in the home. There was also fluctuating interest and negative perceptions about council participation. Some people would say, "Why bother attending? Nothing changes." The residents I was working with were also experiencing changing abilities and changes in their cognition, which sometimes led to disruptions or tension in the meetings. There were often conflicting and strong personalities in the group. Meetings could often get derailed by negative comments from these strong personalities, which would take a lot of patience and redirection techniques to get things back on track. Plus, on top of all that, you've got your own competing priorities and your own workload. And while you're in the thick of things, I'll admit that it's nearly impossible to come up with viable solutions to these barriers that you're experiencing. A lot of it seems inevitable, and as a resident council assistant, you definitely need to be someone who is resilient, flexible, and someone who can jump in and problem solve on the fly. I have recently adopted a new motto that says, if it's not working, suggest a change. And based on my own hindsight reflections in the following slides, I will try to weave together some suggestions for navigating some of the common challenges and identify a few small changes for you to consider implementing at your own homes. My first hindsight reflection is to lead less. As resident council assistant, I had a tendency to take everything on and to do things myself instead of trying to find ways that residents could help me, because it was often faster and it seemed more efficient to do it this way. But all this led to was me taking on more and essentially taking away from the resident experience, because I found myself doing most of the doing and the talking. Many resident councils throughout the province have transitioned to what OARC has termed a shared leadership model. OARC actually has an archived webinar on this topic that you can access on our website that goes into greater detail about what this model can look like and how to go about trialing it. But essentially, this model of leadership removes the traditional titles of council president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer, and it allows the group to focus on individual interests and strengths on the leadership team. I personally found that very few residents wanted to nominate themselves or to be nominated and run in an election. They were often reluctant to take on responsibility of a leadership role, and they didn't want to run against their friends, or they simply weren't interested anymore. In retrospect, I feel that a trial of a shared leadership model in the homes that I was working with might have allowed me to utilize the strengths of a more diverse group of residents instead of working with just one or two people who are holding the elected positions. In order to maximize any residents' council, you need to get to know the people who live in the care community. You need to take the time to get to know their interests, their experiences, and tap into what they might be interested in doing now. Getting this information takes time, and I can't stress enough how important it is to share knowledge learned about the residents in your home in order to achieve a more person-centered and individualized experience for all, not just in the realm of care, but in all aspects of life, including residents' council. Once you get to know someone, for example, perhaps a resident is a retired journalist or a teacher. Maybe they would be the kind of person who would be comfortable chairing a meeting or reading your opening guidelines. Does someone on your council have a knack for numbers? Perhaps they worked as an accountant or they held the position of treasurer on a committee in the community. This person might be able to help with resident council finances. They could count money after a fundraiser or read the treasury report at your next meeting. Do you have any outgoing residents who could be part of a welcoming subcommittee to help new residents adjust to their home? Perhaps these are the individuals you could identify and ask to be greeters at the door where meetings are held, or they could pass around the meeting agendas at the meeting. You can incorporate many more residents when you shift to a strength-based approach. And I urge you to ask yourself, what can the residents do on their own? What could a resident do if I asked them to do something? For example, could they pull a resident right out of a hat to spur on some discussion, much more interactive, instead of you just reading through the list of the 27 resident rights? What could a resident do if you assisted them? For example, is there a resident that could accompany you to post the meeting minutes in every home area or on neighborhood throughout the home? Some other activities that I've identified to encourage more collaboration to increase positive engagement at meetings include the creation of a resident council brochure that could be handed out to new residents and families, or you could include it in the home's move-in or admission package. You may work with the residents on the council to develop your own unique mission statement for the residents' council, or you might go through the exercise of creating a Wordle, which I've actually pictured one on the slide there for you, to visually represent the resident council in using words. Hindsight reflection number 2 is know the act and be proactive. Whether you're a seasoned resident council assistant or new to the role, Or perhaps you're part of the residence council or an administrator who's appointed the assistant. I can't stress enough how important it is to have working knowledge of the Long-Term Care Homes Act. When we take steps to be more proactive, it puts us in a position where we feel more in control, as opposed to being reactive, which many of us are, myself included, especially when questions or concerns come up, perhaps during a resident quality inspection, which can always be a stressful time. Not everyone has the time to read the Act cover to cover and to know it intimately. So OARC has taken some of the guesswork out of things, and they've developed a document called Understanding Our Law, which is essentially a cheat sheet which identifies key legislation as it relates to residence councils. And it explains the meaning behind it in easy to understand layman's terms, which I appreciated. I really wish that I'd known about this document because I was forever pulling out my hard copy of the Act, and sometimes I wasn't 100% clear about the intent of the law and my responsibilities as a key support person to the Residence Council. So my main advice here is don't guess about what's expected of you. Take the time to educate yourself on the Act, ask questions of your administrator or of your team for clarification, and reach out to us at OARC. You don't have to navigate this alone. This brings me to hindsight reflection number 3, get resourceful. OARC has worked closely with our board of directors and many other residents and team members living and working in long-term care to create tools and templates that are functional and can be adapted for your own use. And I've pictured them here on the slide. Here you can see our Residence Council resource guide on the left, our agenda and minutes template, our bylaw, that understanding the law document I just referred to as well. And I'm happy to share that all of these tools and templates are available as hard copy resources, or they can be accessed electronically for free on our website. So I'll take this opportunity to shamelessly plug the OARC website again, because it truly is full of some very helpful resources. And I'll be the first person to admit and acknowledge that I had some fears about change and a real aversion to trying new ways of doing things, especially when you've inherited systems or forms or documents that have always been used. I do encourage you to talk to the residents on your council, maybe print off and show them the tools, like our minute template, for example, so they can see the look and feel of them. And you can suggest implementing some of them even on a trial basis. I promise you it'll make your lives better and your meetings a lot smoother using a lot of these tools. On the main page of the OARC website, you'll see a toolbar down the left side, which I've kind of blown up for you there, with various categories. And the tools page has links to all of our free resources, customizable tools and templates. And many of them are offered in different font sizes as well, if someone wants an enlarged copy of the minutes, for example. Many of the OARC tools include helpful step-by-step instructions or companion guides to walk you through each document as well. You can come back to this site to keep an eye out for upcoming education and workshops. You can read digital copies of our OARC publications, including OARC in Action, which is our monthly newsletter, or our Seasons magazine, which comes out quarterly. And if you've missed one of our live webinars in the past, or perhaps it was full and you couldn't get in, we have each of them archived on our website as well. So we encourage you to go back and watch them, refer back to relevant sections. And a great exercise that you might consider is sitting down and watching a webinar with your resident council or the leadership team, which can be a great way to spark discussion on various topics. Lastly, for newer resident council assistants or those wanting a refresher, we've recorded 6 education modules, which are kind of pictured in the middle there, which are very similar to your home's e-learning or independent learning modules. And they allow you to delve a bit deeper and educate yourself about various aspects of resident council. So everything there from the legislation to the powers of residence council to running meetings. You can tackle these at your own pace, on your own time, and they truly are like a crash course in Resident Council 101. I would highly encourage administrators who are supporting new resident council assistants to direct them to our online tools and modules to help give you some foundational knowledge of resident councils. Hindsight reflection number 4 is to ask for what you need. When I was working as a manager in long-term care and acting as the assistant to council, my own workload, competing priorities, and stress levels made it nearly impossible for me to articulate what I needed in terms of support from my supervisor or from my peers. I encourage everyone on the webinar, especially the staff assistants, to take an honest and open look at how you fit your resident council responsibilities into your work week. I often found that I was staying late to finish typing minutes. I was throwing agendas together at the last minute, and I didn't feel like I was ever doing a good job because I was always rushing and frazzled. In hindsight, I would highly recommend scheduling time for resident council meeting preparation, time to meet with the council's leadership team, and the time required for any administrative tasks, right into your Outlook calendar or your day book. You need to book it as if you were meeting with another manager or a family member and prioritize that time as if it were an appointment. If you don't dedicate time throughout the week or the month, you will always find yourself falling behind and panicking when you are close to missing important deadlines. I know I mentioned the benefits of taking a proactive approach earlier, and this is very much along the same vein. Once you're in a rhythm and you know how much time it takes to complete some of your resident council tasks, you can keep yourself accountable by letting a team member or even your administrator know the time necessary to effectively support the residents council. If they haven't done the role themselves before, they may not be familiar with the types of things you do to help the council, and therefore they might not know how to help or to support you. So it's important that you share with them. From my own experience, the more I shared with my team and other stakeholders about residents council, the more they wanted to help and to be involved. At the home I used to work at, we hosted open education nights for residents, families, team members, and other stakeholders. We invited guest speakers, and we transformed our big auditorium into something like a trade show. I always made a point of having a booth devoted to residents council, and at that table, one or two of our resident leaders would pass out copies about the Resident Bill of Rights. We had a big display board there and pamphlets advertising what resident council was, who was involved, and the exciting activities they were involved with. Now, instead of an open house, you could always consider hosting an education session in your home, and you can specify your audience. And that way people can learn what residents council is all about. You could introduce your resident leaders and help establish some good working relationships between the home's leadership team and the residents council. Another thing to consider is many family members are often curious about residents council, and in my experience, they will often ask to attend the resident council's meetings, which we know are closed and they are intended for residents only. Offering an education session for families may help them learn more about the legislation around residents council, including the role and the powers that residents have in the home. Also, educating frontline team members about resident council is also important, so people understand that resident council is much more than that monthly meeting they see on the calendar. And if you're not keen on running your own information session in your home, you can always reach out to us at OARC for support or to request a home visit or presentation. Now, lastly, I highly recommend speaking with the residents about the possibility of inviting members of the home's leadership team to meet with the residents, answer questions, even just a few meetings a year. The invited guests only need to stay about 15 or 20 minutes, and you really want to enforce that timeline to ensure that council meetings continue to be resident focused and they are a safe space for residents to share openly and freely. Just because a manager is attending does not mean that families or other guests can attend. These meetings are still closed and for residents only. Having periodic guest speakers, in my experience, has dual benefits because first and foremost, residents can engage with the department heads who are essentially subject matter experts, and they can get real-time responses to questions and be part of solutions. But it also allows you as the council assistant a small break from speaking or co-facilitating meetings. Many resident councils are surprised to know that the home's administrator should be making an effort to consult with them at least every 3 months. And this means that the resident council can or should consider inviting the administrator to attend meetings on a quarterly basis to receive updates on important things like the home's quality improvement plan or the annual satisfaction survey. From my own experiences, the more informed and engaged the residents are about the operations of the home, that usually translates to fewer complaints, and instead I was receiving a lot more praise that came as a direct result from their increased level of understanding. And the more face-to-face time the residents have with the home's leadership team in the home, the easier it becomes to develop relationships and partnerships. As I've said before, resident councils cannot operate effectively without good relationships and communication between both the resident council assistant, but also the administrator, who truly sets the tone in the home. As assistant to residents council, especially in more recent years, it is very easy to feel overwhelmed and even lonely at times. There is an internalized sense of responsibility that many of us share, that the success or failure of the residents council in our homes is resting on our shoulders. One of the main reasons I wanted to host a webinar on today's topic was to remind you that you are not alone. With approximately 630 long-term care homes across the province, that means that there are 629 other people, at minimum, who are experiencing many of the same things that you are with their resident councils. So that brings me to hindsight reflection number 5, which is mutual support. I personally think it's great when organizations provide opportunities where team members working in similar roles at different homes and in different regions can come together for face-to-face meetings even once or twice a year and have open discussion and share successes and challenges about various aspects of their roles. Supporting residents' councils was just one area that came up from time to time. And I can tell you that knowing that you're in the same boat as somebody can be very validating. What's even better is when you can put your heads together and work through challenges as a group with fresh eyes and ears and come up with solutions together. You may consider reaching out to your corporate partners or regional leaders and request an opportunity to set up a call with other council assistants in order to connect with others and have those candid dialogue and discussions about your experiences. You could even arrange to meet or speak with resident council assistants working at other homes in your area. And this can be a great opportunity for fruitful discussion and knowledge exchange. At OARC, we've even heard of a home that organized their own in-person get-together with their resident leaders and council assistants for a day of learning and sharing, which I thought was pretty awesome. And OARC's quarterly publication, Seasons Magazine, is another great way to learn from other resident councils' experiences. Seasons is mailed out to your homes, but can also be accessed virtually on the OARC website that I mentioned earlier. In Seasons, you can read submissions from homes across Ontario and learn about innovative programming, quality initiatives, and hear great stories about how residents have exercised the powers as a residents' council to achieve some positive outcomes in their homes. Each featured story references the homes in which the great ideas are happening, so that might inspire you to reach out and connect with those homes. You'll find that most people are more than willing to share their processes and their experiences. And if you have a particular area of interest, I would encourage you to reach out to us at OARC, and we can try to connect you with either a resident council assistant or a residence council at another home who may be facing similar experiences or situations that you are. That can be really helpful to have a meeting of the minds that way. My last hindsight reflection is to have fun, something I often forgot to do, admittedly. Resident council events can help strengthen relationships and promote a sense of fun and camaraderie in the home. Resident councils around the province are planning and sponsoring special events and fundraisers throughout the year. These events are great opportunities to partner with other groups and committees, like your home's family council, or even the staff social committee. And by combining resources, you can share the workload, increase your manpower, and ultimately you can run an even more successful event that boosts morale and increases quality of life for everyone living, visiting, or working in your home. These special events are also great ways to ask your colleagues to roll up their sleeves and work alongside the residents to execute a great event. I encourage you to find ways to inject some levity into your work and find opportunities to work with your council to get creative and have fun planning events together and thinking outside the box. It's a great exercise for everyone. It's also important to market your efforts and showcase the meaningful contributions of the council. I mentioned earlier the idea of having an open house or hosting an education night, but you might also consider dedicating a board, like a bulletin board or wall in your home, and I've seen this on my home visits, where you can visually illustrate all the accomplishments of the resident council over the last year or period of time that you choose. So for those of you who are new to the assistant role, or if you're supporting someone who is, I did come up with a few tips for setting these individuals up for success. And I would say a great first step is to connect with the residents directly. Don't go in thinking you have all the answers, because I can assure you, you don't. You've got to identify the resident leaders in the home and speak with them. They are the experts. And engaging in dialogue like this will help you establish trust and mutual respect early on with the members of Residence Council. It's important to do your homework, learn the history of the home and history of the Residence Council, and review current quality initiatives and resident involvement. Ask the residents, what qualities do you value in a council assistant? You want to make sure you're that good fit that we kept talking about earlier. Lastly, I'd encourage every new assistant to reach out and to seek mentorship from an experienced resident council assistant, either within your organization or local area. They may prove to be an excellent asset to you as you learn the role. Just always be mindful that what works in one home may not always be appropriate in another, because every residence council is truly unique. At OARC, we recognize that residents living in long-term care today are changing. But today, I have tried to highlight that there are still lots of opportunities to ask for help, to utilize resources. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here. It's a great time, an opportunity to connect with other people in your home, people in the community. It's also a great chance to reach out to the Ontario Association of Residence Councils, get to know us, and explore our tools and resources. And lastly, and I would say most importantly, there is still opportunities to have lots of fun and make it your own by working collaboratively in your homes with the residents that you're serving, and they quickly become your friends when you view them as partners to collaborate with. Now, I wanted to end today's presentation with some thanks and some praise. OARC recognizes the amazing work that resident council assistants do, and we want to ensure that the assistants feel as supported, just as supported, as the residents in the homes, in order for them to continue to support resident councils effectively. Now, I think just to to zip back onto the polls, Josie Lee, I wanted to check in and gauge how people are feeling about their role now that they're armed with some new tools and information. So do you feel a bit better prepared and more supported, or do you feel the same as when we started? Now we'll just let that go up for a few more seconds. And I'm thrilled to see that 78% are feeling more informed, more inspired and supported. And this information is very important for us at OARC, especially for Josie Lee and myself on the education team, so that we have a better idea of the education and resources needed moving forward for resident councils and for the people that support them. So before we move forward with questions, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you very much to everyone taking the time out of your busy days to be part of today's live webinar. And to the assistants on the line, thank you for your commitment to personal development and growth. And to the residents and administrators on the line, thank you for seeing the value in learning more about the resident council assistant role so that you can continue to support and work collaboratively together. So I will have Josie Lee open it up for questions now. Josie Lee is our education manager at OARC, so I might defer to her for some answers if there are some questions that come up that we both can contribute to.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Melissa. At this point in time, if you have any questions, just a reminder, you can send those through the chat box, which is located at the bottom of your toolbar, or you are also able to unmute your line to ask either Melissa or myself any questions directly. We'll give everyone just a couple of moments to gather their thoughts and collect their questions. And as questions come through, I will address them to the group.
Maybe I'll jump in here, Josie Lee. One question that I do get often is how do we represent residents who choose not to attend the monthly meeting? And we know that may be a preference of some not to attend, but we do want to make sure that when we meet that we are representing the collective voice of the home. So a solution that's come forward, and I've seen it work very well in a number of homes, is when there is a home area representative, or sometimes it's called a resident ambassador, and they live throughout the building, and they kind of take it upon themselves to get to know the residents, the families, the team members on each floor, and they bring issues and successes, things to celebrate to each council meeting, and essentially they're representing those people who might not attend meetings, but it's a great way to empower residents to be leaders in the home, but also fosters great communication and collaboration as well, so that you make sure that it's not just the 15 or 20 people in the room contributing, that you really are being mindful of everyone living and working and visiting the building.
So we did just have a comment come through in relation to what you were just speaking about, Melissa, and they wanted to let everyone know that they work in a large home, approximately 400 beds, and they have a floor rep model within their shared leadership. And they're just commenting that it has really helped them greatly with portering.
That's excellent to hear. Another great way to involve residents is to have those subcommittees. I know I mentioned having a welcoming committee, but residents on your leadership team might have different passions. Someone might be very passionate about food. One might be involved in another quality area around palliative care. So there might be residents participating in subcommittees within the home, or the resident council might develop their own subcommittee within the council so that they can really hone in on areas of interest and work towards some solutions. So it's another way to kind of have smaller opportunities to meet in between the regularly scheduled meetings.
We'll give everyone another minute or two just for any last questions trickling in. Again, you can use the chat box or unmute your line.
Everyone's quiet today, which I'm hoping is a good sign that we were able to delve into some areas of interest. And I do encourage you to reach out to us via email or on our website. There's a link, a SurveyMonkey link to have additional support. So we also love to hear your success stories, and we're always looking for contributions for our monthly and quarterly publications. So we do encourage you to send them in to us.
So at this point, it doesn't look like we have any additional questions. We did have a couple of comments of gratitude come through, just some comments around how helpful and informative the presentation was. So at this point, I would like to thank Melissa for her willingness to openly reflect and share with all of us as a group this afternoon. And once more, take the opportunity to thank each of you for taking the time out of your day to join OARC. So I will thank everybody, and at this time, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye for now.